Hello everyone, this is part 30 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. The red spirals in Madara's eyes flashed with each beat of the immortal's heart. He stared at Naruto so intently that the teen thought the Chunin Sharingan would burn a hole right through him, even without using the power of Amaterasu. Uchiha's lips were pursed so tightly they had vanished. And Uzumaki could have sworn he heard the grinding of the immortal's teeth. "You are just children, playing at being ninjas," Madara told Naruto, his voice a livid whisper, "but the time for games ends now. You will find out what happens when you cross a true shinobi." He took a step forward, and then vanished. Naruto smelled, rather than saw, the attack to his right rear quadrant, and turned to meet Madara. But the Akatsuki leader had already stabbed the Chunin in the kidney, and was gone. Even as the wound began to close and the organ began to regenerate, Uzumaki again detected Madara approaching him from behind. Thanks to the aroma of his blood on Uchiha's fingers, the young man was able to turn to meet him, moving Kitsune to block while forming the wind chakra blade. But the attack was a feint, and Madara severed Naruto's left hamstring. "You weren't that fast before." Naruto ignored the second crippling injury, still mildly surprised how rapidly his body was healing. Madara's answer was a strike at Uzumaki's throat, but this time the teen was able to block. "You're not using Shunshin," Naruto continued, stopping another attack. Catching a glimpse of Madara, "You opened the inner gates." This gave the traitor pause, amazed that the boy had figured it out. More than that, Uzumaki was catching up again. "Third gate," Madara growled under his breath, "Gate of life." His skin turned red, and again he was able to drive his fingers into Naruto's right bicep, inciting a brief fountain of blood. Then he swept Naruto's legs, focusing on the younger warrior's still injured leg. Uzumaki tried to kip up, but Madara drove his heel into Naruto's sternum, forcing him back down. "You don't care about the damage to your body," Naruto noted, wheezing slightly. He placed his hands to the floor again, but this time he rotated his whole body, throwing out his legs to force Madara back until he was upright again. "Thanks to your immortality," the blonde Chunin continued, "but you can only fight that way for so long, and I've barely started sending chakra to my muscles." His first two injuries now fully healed, Naruto pumped copious amounts of chakra into his muscles, enough to power a Cyclone Spikes jutsu. His speed was almost doubled, but Madara was still slightly faster. Unfortunately, Naruto also found his eyes could not keep up with his body, or his opponent's. He used his nose and ears to help compensate, but they weren't quite doing the job. He barely avoided a strike to his face, and then was clipped into the chest again, obliterating the front of his lab coat and tearing away a palm-sized chunk of skin. Naruto began to sigh in anxiety, hoping one of his previous successes had another meaning. "Illusionary art, 36 frames per second jutsu," Naruto announced, and to his minor surprise, the C-rank genjutsu took effect, speeding up his eyes. He dodged an attack at his stomach easily, and parried the kick aimed at his neck, forcing Madara to withdraw or lose his foot to Kitsune's blade. Then Naruto, though still a shade slower, was able to launch a counterattack, aiming the wind chakra projection of his staff blade at the immortal's left shoulder. Madara slipped behind the strike, and fired a kick at Naruto's groin. The teen avoided him again, and Uchiha snarled his annoyance. "I open the fourth gate," this time the Sharingan master proclaimed loudly, "Gate of pain." There was an audible creaking in his tendons, but Madara's quickness took another jump. He effortlessly sidestepped Naruto's vertical slice, and stabbed out twice in response. The blow to the Chunin's nose was light, barely bloodying it, but the stronger blow to Uzumaki's right forearm nearly forced the teen to drop his weapon. Despite his earlier bluff, Naruto knew he could not increase his speed much further without resorting to an actual jutsu, and Madara could copy that. But another idea came to him. "There's more than one way to fight a fast opponent," Naruto announced, remembering two events from the Hidden Sound invasion: ninja art, blood clone jutsu. The red liquid on the floor flew up to join the material covering Madara's hands, forming into a copy of Naruto, already gripping Uchiha's arm. Unable to move away, the Akatsuki leader was forced to send chakra into his palm to block Kitsune, and the blade still cut deep into his hand. He kicked Naruto back, and then slammed his fist into the clone's jaw to break free. The Akatsuki leader was annoyed that the clone was not killed. Instead, the duplicate painfully snapped the dislocated jaw back into place, the bruise fading even as it formed. "You're not fast enough to fight two of me," the fox-faced men echoed one another. Sasam dug in her heels, sending chakra to her feet. She hauled back on her thread, also sending power to her muscles. The cord was crisscrossed 147 times underneath the demon and anchored to the walls of the valley. As she pulled it taut, the three tails' feet started to leave the riverbed. But the huge monster struggled, kicking its feet and whipping its tails, and Sasam was yanked forward. Just as she was about to be pulled off her feet, letting the demon touch down again, Kiba and Akamaru appeared in front of her, grabbing the thread. "Hold on, we got you," Kiba said firmly, and Akamaru roughed through the thread clenched between his teeth. With the additional muscle, the demon's feet were lifted a full meter off the ground. Shino dashed over, and took hold of the line as well. "Can you hold it for a minute?" Sasam asked her teammates worriedly. Kaidi had finally made up her mind between helping Lee and helping Team Yugao. The elder Kunoichi grasped the chakra thread and braced herself. "We have it," Shino said evenly. Sasam released the cord with one hand, and drove 10 of her dwindling supply of needles into the bedrock. She quickly began to wind the thread between the spikes, creating a pattern that spread the force of the Bijuu's mass between the anchors, making them more secure as the creature thrashed about. "You can let go," she said with a relieved sigh. Kiba and Akamaru did so immediately, both Shino and Kaidi were more tentative. But the impromptu net held, and the demon was suspended 4 feet above the ground. With the already limited mobility of the three tails' neck, there was no way its spitting attacks could reach them, and the threat of its tails was also diminished. The demon continued struggling, giving Shino pause. "Are you sure it will hold?" he asked squarely. "It broke your threads before." "I made this thread stronger," she reassured him, "and it doesn't have any leverage like it did last time. But if there are any cracks or soft spots in the walls, it might be able to work the needles free, so we should defeat its master as soon as we can." Aburame nodded, and the 5 warriors began to creep forward under the demon. The woman named Daisuke had continued to whine non-stop, even as she dodged all of Lee's attacks. She produced no more weapons and refused to use taijutsu, and his constant blows kept her from forming a jutsu. "That's not fair," she complained as the turtle was hoisted into the air and immobilized. She retreated so she could have a chance to sign, firing a low-level water jutsu at Lee to buy herself time. He split the water with his chucks and chased after her. "Multi-clone shadow jutsu," she announced, completing her second technique, and instantly there were dozens of duplicates of the Akatsuki aspirant. Half closed in on Lee, and the rest fell back. Lee swung his left-hand nunchaku at the first duplicate to approach him. She caught the weapon, and held it while another copy moved in and kicked at his knee. Lee moved his leg out of the way, and tried to counter, but the clone easily avoided his bludgeon. "What is Lee doing?" Kiba asked, as the older Chunin flailed at the air, while Daisuke backed off, signing for a new jutsu. "He's caught in a genjutsu," Kaidi smiled slightly. "I will help him." She increased her speed, carefully avoiding the demon's legs. After she finished navigating Sasam's trap, she hurried over to Lee, dodging his random attacks, and tapping him on the forehead. "Release," the mist Kunoichi announced. Lee blinked twice, and glanced around in confusion. "Where did they go?" he asked his ally. "It was an illusion," she told him. "Now, duck." She grabbed his head and pushed him down as Daisuke completed her jutsu. The Akatsuki candidate unleashed a concentrated beam of white-hot fire. Though she would have struck Lee if not for Kaidi's interference, her main targets were the chakra threads on the right side of the bayou. But the Fuma clan's unique weaponry withstood the attack. "Fine," she pouted, upset she wouldn't be dropping the giant turtle on the 3 young leaf ninjas. Then she had another idea. She sent her chakra into the amulet while relaying her new orders to the 3 tails through the auditory genjutsu she had set up to avoid having to her enemies hear her directions. The demon pulled its head, legs, and tails into its shell. With no threads wrapped around its limbs, it was now simply lying on Sasam's mesh. The turtle fired a small jet of water out of the front of its shell, and began rocking on the web. Another shot and the sum of the needles holding it began to groan. It was nearly swinging on the threads when Kiba and Akamaru crawled out from under it. Only the slightly higher threads in the front and back were keeping it in the net when Sasam exited, and as she darted away, the young woman looked back, and realized her last teammate would not make it in time. Shino. As the behemoth reptile slid free from the net, Sasam let 2 needles attached to the last of her thread fly. They dug into the insect trainer's jacket, and she hauled back with all her might. Shino cried out in pain as the 3 tails clipped his right leg, but was pulled clear before he could be completely flattened. As Sasam caught him, she realized she had miscalculated. The Bayu was sliding straight towards them. Sasam. Shino. Kiba howled as they disappeared under the monster. Damn it. He looked down, angrily, until Akamaru barked happily. Your basic plan was sound, Yugao lectured proudly, as she set Sasam down, but you should have positioned some threads over the top and front to back. Yes, sensei, the Chunin agreed in relief. Iruka, you better take a look at Shino's leg, Kakashi advised, setting down his lover's other student. The former teacher knelt beside the Chunin, and cut Shino's pants away to get at his leg. He was mildly sickened by what he saw. Sasam glanced over and gasped, instantaneously looking miserable. I'll do what I can, the former teacher reassured Aburame, but I don't think even Lady Tsunade could. Thank you, Iruka-sensei, Shino whispered painfully, and thank you, Sasam. But I didn't, the girl protested weakly, her voice wavering. You saved his life, Anko said kindly. Then she punched the younger Kunoichi in the shoulder and continued in her normal harsh tones, now get the lead out, maggot. We still have a demon to deal with. You were right, Madara's voice was oddly withdrawn as he stopped and his skin returned to normal. I could open the remaining gates, but you are still not quite at your top speed, and you can make more of these clones. Partially seeing the technique with the Sharingan, and having landed an unsuccessful blow, the immortal had formulated a general idea of how tough the blood clone was. Just like before, it appears taijutsu is not the answer, Uchiha noted, confusing the teen. This will require other types of attacks. I've got another kind of attack for you, Naruto countered, sheathing Kitsune before raising his hand above his head. His silver chakra began to roil above his palm, and the clone drew the sphere out into a disc. Fuyuten, Raisin Shuriken. The twin warriors shouted, throwing the disc. Madara had heard descriptions of the attack, and knew it might just be able to kill him. Kamui. Uchiha countered, banishing the wind star. He held the technique, and the blood clone pushed the original Uzumaki back to they would not both be swallowed. Hey, that's Kakashi-sensei's move. Naruto shouted angrily, as the clone vanished and the void closed. No, Obito's left eye just happened to. Madara was distracted from his rage by his mundane annoyance at the repeated suggestion, and took a deep breath to calm himself. It doesn't matter. Because you have helped me to make up my mind. I was simply going to kill you, but that would be a waste of a golden opportunity. It is unlikely that the research division will ever again be able to study a newly born bloodline trait. Besides, a quick death is too easy, not when I can let them dissect you over and over again. So I have decided to give you to them, to examine and cut and scrutinize however they desire. Aren't you getting a little ahead of yourself? Naruto parroted Madara's initial sentiment. No. Sasano-o. For an instant, the red spirals in Madara's Chunin Sharingan flashed blue, and Naruto could have sworn he felt a wave of cold wash over him. A blue humanoid form rose out of the first Uchiha, stepping forward and lifting its 7-foot-long katana. Naruto drew his staff blade to block, dragging a chuckle from Madara. The god specter was not a physical being, it existed only in the mind, and could neither block nor be blocked by corporeal means. The manifestation of the Uchiha's ultimate genjutsu swung the curved blade down. It passed right through the blocking weapon, and cut Naruto from shoulder to crotch. Reality fell away, and Madara started to plan the illusion he would use to torture Naruto for the rest of the young man's life. Existing in the span of a thought, he could spend virtual hours planning the perfect way to make Naruto suffer before the teen even finished blinking. He contemplated the classics, slow burning, starvation, or water torture. But then he considered what he knew about the young man. His pattern of sacrificing himself for his friends gave the immortal an idea. render him powerless, and make him watch as his friends are tortured, Madara whispered to himself, and the genjutsu began to take shape. But he stopped when he, impossibly, heard something moving behind him. As much as I'd like to see that, a sexy voice purred, I'm afraid that's just not going to happen. Madara turned slowly, hiding his trepidation. The young woman appeared to be an attractive, definitively female version of the frozen Chunin. She regarded him with a lazy, smug grin. Madara raised his hand in supplication, watching her carefully. And you don't recognize me. Naruto pouted, feigning hurt, I'm hurt, Madara. How about now? Despite their myriad of previous encounters, Madara could barely contain the impulse to howl in pain and terror as the fully unleashed form of the Nine-Tails Fox Demon stood before him. Then she reverted to the humanoid body of Naruto, smirking even wider. You. He gasped, how? You're dead. She finished, amused, yes, very much. What is this? He demanded, regaining his composure, how are you here? Someone like you couldn't comprehend, she mocked him, running her hand through her hair confidently. Then she realized what she had done, and smiled openly. I guess I have gotten used to this body, she admitted sheepishly to herself. Then she turned her attention back to Uchiha, her honest mirth once more returning to a vicious, arrogant joy. But to put it in a way you can understand, I'm a trap for you. A fragment of my mind, a counter genjutsu, burned into Naruto's soul. Whenever you or a member of your bloodline uses your special illusions against the pup, and presumably anyone who inherits his power, you will find me waiting. After all, I died so Naruto could kill you for me, so it would hardly do for me to let you incapacitate him. Susanoo and Tsukuyomi will never again work on Naruto Uzumaki. She began to change once more, but this time more slowly. Her features became more vulpine and she grew at a more leisurely pace, surpassing him first in length, then in height. Madara tried to call on his Sharingan to control the demoness, but she was not really there for him to command. Finally, in her true shape, if not her full size, the spirit paused and regarded him again. By the way, gone was the voice of Naruto, replaced by the infernal growl of the Kyuubi. If you could do me a favor, use Amaterasu on Naruto next. I've always wanted to see how your so-called divine flame stood up to the inferno of a true demon. Once she reached her full size, the Nine-Tails Fox Demon lowered her head and bit Madara in half with a single, smooth motion. Shino, I'm sorry, Iruka said, I've done what I can but. Shino, Sasum whispered sadly, and then was slammed to the ground by Anko. Eyes up, kid. Mitarashi growled again as the turtles' stream of sickening water fired over their heads. If you can't keep your head in the game, just go sit with Shino. No, I'm fine. The teen shook her head, and took a quick accounting of her arsenal, but I only have 3 non-poison needles left, and 14 feet, 7 inches of thread. Use your lightning and wind jutsu, Yugao instructed, physical attacks won't work on the creature. Speaking of which, Kakashi said pointedly, looking at his rival. What? Guy asked guiltily, as he bounced off the turtle's shell. I understand how important your promise on Lee's behalf is, the copy ninja scolded his friend gently, but no amount of taijutsu is going to even scratch the three-tailed skin. We need the flaring devil of the Hidden Leaf Village. But my oath, Guy, Kakashi barked. All right, Guy said unhappily, but only because all of our lives are in enormous danger. And as recompense, when we return to the village I will have to do 501 thumb push-ups, with each thumb. Guy began signing, and grandiosely stated, Raiten, Thunder Pressure Jutsu. Might Guy held out his hands, 5 feet apart. A column of pure white lightning formed between them, shooting at the demon turtle. The strike carved out a deep gash in the Bijuu's shell, and Guy was already moving his hands again. Kaiten, Crimson Passion Jutsu. The bowl-haired Jonin intoned. 3 intertwining streaks of deep red fire flowed towards the demon, playing across its armor. I did not know Guy could use ninjutsu, Sasum said to Anko in amazement, as the two women's paths crossed again. Of course he can, the serpent user scoffed, he's a fully qualified Jonin. He used to be famous for his flashy fire and lightning techniques, before he swore to only use taijutsu for Lee's sake. Where do you think Tenten learned her summoning jutsu from? I will take your punishment with you, Guy-sensei, Lee vowed through his tears, even as he aimed another punch at Daisuke's stomach. I never meant to hold you back. The whiny renegade had been pushed back to the edge of the spotlights by Rock Lee and Kaidi Mizuno. She launched another jutsu, but even as she completed the technique, Kaidi grabbed Lee's shoulder and announced, "Release." While shaking her head. "You'll need a lot better genjutsu than that." The mist seductress sounded less than impressed. "Illusions to duplicate real attacks won't get you anywhere against me." Daisuke growled, and for the first time launched a melee attack, a kick at Kaidi's face. Lee caught her leg, but quickly let go, blushing furiously when he noticed their respective positions and the arrangement of her yukata gave him a clear view her panties. She stepped back hastily, her loose robe dropping back down to cover her legs. Daisuke's face turned slightly red, but she did not protest as she had with their fighting styles. "My apologies," Lee bowed. Kaidi pulled him out of the way, as Daisuke dropped another kunai into her palm and threw it at the exposed top of his head. "Don't get distracted," his ally advised, both amused and annoyed. "She is a genjutsu expert, she's quite ready to use her assets, meager though they may be, in battle." That little flash was probably intentional. Lee nodded, and Daisuke bristled at the insult. Then her light purple hair whipped behind her, as she snorted at the more voluptuous woman. "Who'd want to carry all that extra weight around anyway?" Daisuke shot back, and for a brief instant Lee thought he should stop them, despite the fact the Akatsuki minion was intent on taking their lives. "Kaiten, Abyssal Flare Jutsu." Kiba intoned again, this time aiming at the demon's head. The skin scorched and blistered, but the demon only appeared to be moderately impaired. It turned its eyes to Inuzuka, and instead of the stream, it disgorged a dense sphere of water at him. Kakashi joined him as he dodged that counter. "I didn't know you could use that move," Naruto's teacher said appreciatively. "Do you think you can manage it again?" Kiba looked at the burns on his palm, but nodded anyway as the turtle's tails forced Sasam and Yugao to abandon their half-shaped jutsus and scatter. "Why?" the dog trainer asked, and Akamaru pulled the distracted Anko out from under the three tails' descending foot. In response, Kakashi raised his headband to uncover his left eye. Kiba grinned in appreciation. Both warriors stopped at the same instant, and turned to face the aquatic Bayu. Kakashi was watching the teen as much as the monster, and completed the same set of hand signs in unison. Kaiten, Abyssal Flare Jutsu. The two leaf soldiers concluded simultaneously, and twin beams of purple hellfire struck the creature's right leg. As its knee crumbled from the injury, it roared at them and fired a massive wave. Unfortunately, even as they dodged, it was standing again. Though it did not regenerate as fast as the higher-ranked tailed beasts, the damage they inflicted on the three tails was still healing while they watched. "Hurry up, Kaidi," Yugao pleaded under her breath as Guy caught the tail swinging at him and was pushed back. Though she did not hear the request, Kaidi nevertheless sped up her seals, releasing her own genjutsu on the shrill kunoiki. Daisuke grimaced, as she was surrounded famous actresses and models, all sniffing and staring at her smugly. She barely dodged Lee's heel drop, unable to see him clearly through the fictional, condescending horde. "Release," she snapped, signing her next technique, ninja art, painted fires jutsu. A blaze formed around her, causing Daisuke and the background behind her to appear as an inferno in watercolors to the taijutsu expert. Then the myriad of flames began to advance towards him. Lee simply stood there, pointedly ignoring the illusion. "Suten, extinguishing deluge jutsu, the land of water," Jonan yelled, putting out the flames before they reached Lee. "That one was real?" he asked, and Kaidi nodded. "Every once in a while, she throws in a ninjutsu, hoping to catch her opponent off guard," Mizuno explained, "or at least, that's what I would do if I relied on those sorts of illusion." Ninja art, lion's raw jutsu. For an instant Daisuke heard the calls of big cats, but she cancelled the fantasy quickly as well. She ducked under Lee's horizontal kick and vertical swing of his right nunchaku while forming an advanced technique. The Akatsuki aspirant was able to avoid Kaidi's next illusion by ducking behind Lee, and pushed the Chunin back with a high front kick to his chin. "You are very adept at dodging," Lee told his opponent, "however based upon what I am hearing of my allies, I need to finish this shortly." "I won't lose to a pair of second-rate ninja," Daisuke argued, completing her jutsu, ninja art, toddler regression. Lee shuddered as she tagged him, and then smiled stupidly at the demon. "Turtar," he burbled, and began to stagger unevenly towards the three tails. Kaidi reached out to break the spell, but this time Daisuke cut her off, swinging a pair of kunai underhand at the mist hunter's forearm. I thought you didn't like melee combat. Kaidi's eyes narrowed angrily. Not all illusions are crafted of chakra, the renegade Kunoichi shrugged, stabbing with one dagger and slashing with the other. The amulet on her wrist caught Kaidi's attention again, as the platinum blonde fell away, thinking. That doesn't fit the rest of your image, the ally of the leaf noted, simple yet elegant, and other than the pattern of your yukata, nothing to make you stand out. And all of your weapons are well hidden. A silver amulet with a large sapphire definitely marks you. So I'm thinking that must be how you control the demon. It happens to be a memento. Daisuke tried to cover her anxiety, but trailed off from the wry expression on Kaidi's face. Fine. So, it might give you the power to control the beast, but it's also a big target. The Kazekige's daughter smirked, ducking under another slash while starting to sign. I just need to trap you long enough to take it. Ninja art, charging lantern jutsu. The valley around Daisuke flashed, glowing more intensely than the brightest day. The next instant all light was gone, plunging her into the blackest night. The cycle repeated, and on the third flare, she released the genjutsu. Her vision cleared, but Kaidi was gone. Daisuke started to glance at her wrist, when her body seized up in pain. She looked down at her chest, and as if foes came into view. The sword was plunged into her heart. She gasped as the convex blade was withdrawn and Kaidi Mizuno reappeared. The mist hunter raised her blade again. How? Daisuke moaned as her vision began to dim. Illusion of illusions jutsu, Kaidi said kindly, my specialty. The genjutsu you thought you escaped was not the one you were trapped in. Kaidi brought her leaf-shaped sword down again, intoning, Suten, slicing waves jutsu. Enhanced by the chakra art, her ziphos divided the amulet with only the slightest pause. So clean was the cut that the gemstone was split without shattering. The half no longer connected to the chain fell to the earth with a faint ping, and Daisuke's body collapsed on top of it. With its crafter gone, the genjutsu on Lee faded, just before Anko could liberate him. The turtle trumpeted in triumph, and glared briefly at the leaf shinobi, considering. Then it appeared to shrug, and started to lumber quickly towards the barricade. Before it could reach, the visible half of the amulet began to smoke. The demon struggled to move forwards, however it was being slowly drawn back towards the citadel. The rescue team darted to the sides of the canyon, Iruka carrying the unconscious Shino, as the three tails skidded and scraped backwards. Kakashi lowered his headband again, as the demon started to fade from view. It lifted into the air as it became less substantial, and flew more rapidly back to the Akatsuki's stronghold. In short order, the turtle vanished from their view, too thin to be seen in the dim beyond the floodlights. The two teams gathered around Shino again. How is he? Anko asked her lover, unable to fully hide her worry under her tough persona. I'm not done yet, Iruka contradicted his earlier statement, and did not cover his sadness, but I think he'll probably lose the leg. He looked up at Sasum, Kiba, and Yugao, and apologized. But he will live, Azuki affirmed. The male member of Team Hisashi nodded. Iruka, keep working on him, Kakashi ordered, slightly hoarse, and Sasum, stay with them. The rest of us still have a mission. This isn't over, Shukaku roared impotently, as his core was compressed into the kettle, I will break out of there, and then I will slaughter you all. No, you will not, Gaara said matter-of-factly, as the lid slammed onto the pot. Once the demon was out of sight, Matsuri and Tsutomu dropped the barriers that had deflected the one-tails. Nitsuki, Baki, if you please, the Kazekage set down the container, and stepped away. The two Sand Jonin hurried over, and Shikamaru meandered over to Temari. Now that everything done, the young woman looked to be on the verge of tears. Part of the normally apathetic young man wanted to embrace her, but he knew she would not react well to that with so many people around. Instead, he settled for simply putting his hand on her shoulder. She placed her hand over his, forcing a weak, grateful smile. The two shinobi Gaara had called for both took out blank paper talismans, and crafted new seals while adhering the tags to the top of the pot. Will that hold? Shikamaru asked curiously. It will last until we return to the Sunagakur, the Kazekage answered. Once we are home, we will take more permanent measures. The lazy genius nodded, satisfied. Nitsuki, Tsutomu, Gaara addressed his soldiers again, take Kankuro and the one-tails back to the village. The masked Jonin nodded silently, but the Kunoichi shook her head in protest. With all due respect, Lord Kazekage, Nitsuki started firmly, I am your bodyguard. When I let you out of my sight during the sound liberation, you were seriously injured. The Akatsuki are at least as dangerous as Kabuto was, so my place is at your side. Gaara's eyes narrowed slightly, but Baki interjected before their leader could speak. Kankuro was my student, the one-eyed shinobi said softly, I should be the one to take him home. Very well, there was a small catch in Gaara's voice, Baki and Tsutomu will return to the village. The rest of us will proceed. They moved to comply, Tsutomu taking the container, while Baki recalled the puppets, and then gently lifted Kankuro's body. They disappeared into the night, and the former Jinchuriki turned his attention back to Ino. How is Choji? He asked again. The Akamaiki heir looked painfully small in his damaged armor, as if he had lost almost a third of his body mass. He'll live, she said. I dealt with the worst of his injuries, and gave him the antidote. But he needs a hospital and some real food, not more food pills. He won't be in any shape to fight for a while. Then you should stay here with him, the Wind Shadow instructed, Shikamaru. His second order trailed off as he noticed his sister's face. Matsuri, he changed his mind, stay here with them as well. In case there is another attack. Seems like there's a pretty good chance of that, Shikamaru noted as the tapping of unmasked footsteps emerged from the far end of the valley. Hinata was surprised there were no guards before the large double doors blocking the entrance to the Akatsuki facility. She noticed all of the tracks leading into the northern gully, and concluded the sentinels had all left to confront Shikamaru's group. She paused briefly and looked back in concern. If we had to fight Ni, she wondered, does that mean the others were forced to fight Abayu as well, or did the Akatsuki have some other sort of defense prepared? She shook her head, no, they can take care of themselves. I have to rescue Naruto. She considered the door. She could not see through it, and based on the chakra infusing it, she did not think she could bypass it with a low-level teleportation technique. And there was no handle or lock that she could find. I don't have time to be subtle, she told herself, I'll have to do it Naruto's way. She took out 2 food pills, being more than slightly drained from constantly using her Suijin Byakugan and from sealing the 2 tails. She then placed her hands together, and announced, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hinata handed one of the tablets to her clone, and they both consumed the supplements. Then the original Hyuga spread her hands wide, starting to focus her chakra. The clone began to slide her hands over the surface of the forming sphere, injecting more chakra and helping to shape it. The spiraling orb was almost 5 feet in diameter, larger than Hinata had ever created before. Odama Rasengan, they both proclaimed, slamming the sphere into the door. The reinforced wood and metal groaned, resisting, but in the end was not strong enough. The pale beauty forced the upgraded jutsu all the way through the 1-meter-thick barrier, creating a perfectly circular hole. She bowed to her clone, and the duplicate bowed as well before vanishing. Stepping through the breach, Hinata frowned in exasperation. Many of the inner walls had the same secrecy enhancements as the door, partially blocking her enhanced vision. But there was no one to prevent her, and the rest of the ground floor was also clear, so Hinata hurried to the stairs. The second floor was empty, but on the third floor she found a cafeteria containing a pair of shinobi in full battle gear, having a late-night snack after the guard shift. Seeing an opportunity, she charged into the room, and straight towards the still-standing male ninja. He dropped him tray when he saw her, but was already too late. 8 trigrams, 32 volts, she incanted, driving her lightning-laced fingers into 63 of his chakra points. He collapsed, unconscious. Hinata turned to face his companion, and the slender young woman had jumped to her feet. Again, the Hyuga sign was faster, striking each of the Akatsuki minion's shoulders and hips twice. With no control of her limbs, the renegade started to collapse, but Hinata caught her and eased her back down onto the bench, still holding onto the front of the disabled woman's shozaku. Now, please tell me, where is Naruto Uzumaki being held? Hinata's polite tone and phrasing were at odds with her fiercely determined visage. Before the rogue could answer, Hinata pushed her away hard, knocking the underling to the ground and propelling herself backwards. As she skidded to a halt facing the newly destroyed entryway, a mass of sharpened roots stabbed into the space she had been occupying. The black side of Zetsu mused, I was going to answer the security breach at the gate, when I heard a scuffle in the cafeteria. And who should I find but Hinata Hyuga? What happened to the bikini? White Zetsu mocked in false dismay. Hinata tried to ignore him, but colored slightly regardless. Still, her stern look remained. Where is Naruto? She demanded. Why should I tell you? Black Zetsu offered, you will be in your own cell soon enough. This won't be like the last time, she told him, sending chakra into Ginmaki to generate the electrical blades. Really? Why not? The pale half of the floral villain asked in feigned confusion. Besides the fact I'm fully equipped, and you don't have the advantage of numbers. She counted calmly, we're on the third floor of a stone and steel building, in the middle of a bedrock valley. That does not lend itself to plant-based ninjutsu. She might have a point, the white side told his other half nervously. Don't let her rattle you, the black half stated firmly, she's still no match for me. He raised his hand, and gestured towards her. The foliage in the center of the room flexed, and then shot at her again. Hinata moved deftly between the roots, slicing them to ribbons with her energy-bladed coat. After a few moments, the stumps pulled back, and Zetsu finished signing. Ninja art, acorn bombs, he tossed a handful of the oak nuts at her. The seeds were glowing ominously, but Hinata did not even blink. 8 trigrams palm's heavenly spin, the Hyuga Jutsu not only knocked the bombs away, it also threw aside the tables and benches around Hinata, and pushed her original prisoners to the edge of the room. The seeds scattered around the cafeteria, each exploding in small sphere of force when they struck the walls or the floor. After she finished her rotation, Hinata raced forward, slicing through the new vines that appeared to intercept her. She slashed at Zetsu, carving through the bench that replaced him. Even as he reappeared, she was almost on him again, and the right pinky ring bearer was forced to substitute again to avoid being beheaded. She's serious this time, the pale half noted glibly. Shut up and focus, the dark side growled. What? The white Zetsu protested, if you're signing, there isn't much else I can do. She's right about there not being any vegetation here. Try the kitchen, the black portion instructed, completing his next skill, ninja art, kudzu jutsu. He tossed another bunch of seeds, this set smaller, oval, and tan. Hinata hopped over the attack, intent on reaching him. But when the seeds hit the stone floor, they erupted into a tangled mess that snared Hinata's legs. She struggled, slicing at them, but the vines grew faster than she could cut. They quickly encircled her waist and began constricting her chest. The Chunin took a deep breath to steady herself, and placed her hands together. Byakugan art, 0-point defense, she activated the formalized version of the technique Neji had improvised during his fight with Kidomaru. She created narrow blades of energy out from every point on her chakra network, slicing through the grasping tendrils. The stalks fell away, but Zetsu's jutsu was not ended, and the kudzu resumed trying to trap her. But her cousin's technique had bought her the time she needed. Barely visible under the massing plants, a jutsu seal spread out from her feet. Protection of the 8 trigrams 64 palms, Hinata intoned. Her upper body began to bend and sway, and she cut the vines into pieces too small to support Zetsu's jutsu. When the multi-hued renegade realized the kudzu was no longer responding, he stopped maintaining the flow of chakra, and the remains of the plants rapidly withered and rotted until they were just a layer of dust on the floor. Look, corn, white Zetsu noted, and kernels of the yellow grain pelted Hinata. She frowned in confusion, as did Zetsu. You call that an attack? The serious part of the dichotomous Akatsuki member asked. Nope, the carefree half answered lightly, I call that a distraction. This is the attack, asparagus. The vegetables shot out of the kitchen, sharpened and hardened by his chakra, skewering the distracted kunoiki. As the Akatsuki foot soldiers came into view, their leader caught Gaara's eye. Under his calm exterior, the Kazekage was just as enraged about Kankuro's death as Temari. And sealing the one-tails had not been as satisfying as killing Shima had been to his sister. So the former Jinchuriki saw a perfect target on which to vent. Deal with the cannon fodder, he instructed his allies, rising into the air on a disk of sand, Deidara is mine. As he passed over the low-rank warriors, a few decided to try to make a name for themselves, throwing kunai or shurikens at him. His platform shifted in size and shape seemingly with a will of its own, absorbing the attacks. Then the grunts in the front paid for the distraction, as Temari and Kamatari combined their wind force again. Double-cutting whirlwinds, the ninja and her familiar announced in tandem, and 6 large arcs of sharpened air felled 19 of the warriors, cutting a wedge into their front line. Shadow Possession Jutsu, Shikamaru latched onto the silhouettes of 5 of the incoming soldiers. He forced them to turn back around, and throw every blade they had at the bandits behind them. Then he released their shadows as the controlled warriors were struck down by their allies. Nitsuki was much less flashy, but just as deadly. She dove into the gap Temari created, and eliminated a dozen of the renegades with her absolute zero fists, freezing heads or torsos with her punches, and then shattering them with a follow-up kick. Despite her orders, she plowed forward after Gaara, determined not to let her charge lose to the ring bearer again. Matsuri hung back as instructed, guarding Ino and Choji, picking off the stragglers that slipped past the others. And there were more than a few. The valley was too wide for the 4 of them to cover completely. Gaara landed before Deodara, skewering the 3 fools who tried to attack him from behind. He glared at the blonde man, a dangerous spark in his pale, blue eyes. I defeated you before, the Akatsuki agent noted, and this time, I don't have to spare your life. This time, you cannot hold my village hostage, the Kazekage countered, and I have to wonder how much damage you can inflict on this valley without incurring the ire of your superiors. C2. Hounding Clay, Deodara grimaced slightly as he signed, ending by extending both of his hands. The 2 maws on his palms opened wide, disgorging 2 large, brown lumps. The masses took the form of 2 large wolfhounds, which started stalking around the Kazekage. The few Solida who remained close began pushing forward, apparently feeling that the possibility of death at the hands of the leaf and sand ninjas was preferable to staying close to their leader. The corners of Gaara's mouth turned up slightly and he indicated ox, dog, and dragon. But the jutsu did not do anything obvious, and the self-style artist directed his terracotta canines to attack. Before they could reach him, the dog bombs were torn to pieces, and instead of being struck by 2 large explosions, Gaara was obscured by hundreds of smaller and less focused blasts. Deodara briefly wondered if he had succeeded despite the unexpected destruction of his sculptures. But the smoke cleared, and the Kazekage stood in the same spot, unperturbed and unharmed. What did you do to my art? The Akatsuki member grimaced, trying to control his outrage. Gaara did not answer, but took a step forward. As he did, he appeared to shimmer and shift. Deodara's frown deepened. A genjutsu then, the artist decided, release. But the sand leader's appearance did not change, and his next step still flickered. Deodara sent out a clay robin to test Gaara, and, like the dogs, the false bird was shredded by some invisible force. The pyromaniac fine-tuned his modified left eye as the incendiary earth exploded. Now he could see it, a thin cloud of sand, rotating around the Kazekage's high speed. So that's it, he noted, a fresh way to shield yourself. Making up for your new weakness. A way to attack and defend all at once is hardly a weakness, Gaara shrugged, but I have used more traditional jutsu to make up for the theft of the one-tails. My sister and apprentice both say I am overcompensating, but in some respects I am much stronger than I was when you ambushed me last year. If you don't like my slicing mirage, then how about this? Fuyuten, Stone Grinder Jutsu. The Kazekage extended his right hand, and a stream of wind chakra-infused sand shot out at incredible speed. C1. Armor of Explosions. A small cloud of explosive mosquitoes flew out from between teeth of Deodara's left hand's mouth. They swarmed in front of the blonde artist, and when the sand struck them they exploded outwards, pushing the particles away. It appears we both have dangerous forms of defense, Gaara noted, pulling back his ammunition. Then he swept forward his hands, unleashing 3 shuriken from each. Deodara released a large dragonfly to destroy each of the silicon shurikens, but one of the insects missed, and the projectile dug deep into his chest before turning back into dust and returning to Gaara. I don't know if my C4, Garuda would get through that barrier, Deodara pondered, sending out a quintet of clay kittens to try to keep Gaara at a distance, and even if it did, Lord Pain seems touchy about me killing underlings recently, so I probably should not try it anyway. And my C3, Kyokan would tear up this valley too much, like he said. But maybe there is another way I can use C3. C3, Winter Tiger. The clay that emerged from his hands flowed together, becoming a 10-foot-long tiger, with a thick, scraggly mess of fur. The earthen beast did not hesitate, it leapt straight for Gaara, its claws extended. It hit Gaara's hazy barrier, setting off a series of small but powerful explosions across its surface. But as the exaggerated layer of hair was stripped away, the remainder of the terracotta feline pushed through, driving its nails into the younger man's chest before self-destructing. A new masterpiece, Deodara smirked. But as the smoke cleared, instead of the Kazekige's broken, bloody remains, he was treated to the sight of cracked fragments of a hollow sandstone shell. His visible eye widened in worry, and before he could act, he felt a presence behind him and heard Gaara's soft yet powerful voice. Explosions are also useful to cover for a substitution, the former Jinchuriki noted. He stabbed out with his right hand, sheathed in a broad, flat blade of sand. The ring bearer flipped forward, unable to avoid a gash to his back, but bringing his hands around. C2. Falling petals beauty, he unleashed a torrent of clay cherry blossom petals, which danced in the night breeze like the real thing. The sakura exploded all around Gaara, but his sand shield absorbed the blast. How much longer can you last? Gaara asked, allowing a touch of his anger and enjoyment to creep into his voice. That injury is serious. And more importantly, this stone valley is not the best place for you to fight. There is no earth for you to take in, so once you use what you already have, your exploding clay techniques will be unusable. And when that happens, you will die. Deodara froze, suddenly realizing how precarious his situation was. He was not eliminating Gaara's sand. This was no one-for-one trade-off of components. The dogs, the tiger, the kittens, the bugs, and the blossoms, he had used over 2/3 of the clay he had previously absorbed. You think you will be able to kill me? Deodara laughed madly. Think again. If I must die tonight, there's no reason for me to hold back. He ripped aside the black and red robes, revealing fully the fourth mouth on his chest. He held both of his hands in front of it, and began to regurgitate clay from his hands into his chest, like a grotesque caricature of a mother bird feeding her babies. His skin began to blacken and bloat, and his legs began to pull back into his body. Once the feeding had completed, his arms were absorbed as well, and his head followed quickly behind. In the end, all that was left was a black sphere, with the giant mouth from Deodara's chest and his right eye staring at the wind shadow. They say an artist is never valued in his life, he said proudly, but you will bear witness to my final masterpiece. Although, witness, might not be the right word, as you won't live to tell anyone about it. Maybe participant would be better. Either way, C0, Kyukyoku Geijutsu. Deodara's new form started to glow and contort. His mouth grinned viciously through the pain as his body started to explode. Raiten, Gigawatt Jutsu, Gaara incanted after 6 quick hand seals. He directed the stream of lightning chakra at Deodara, whose glow began to dim. What are you doing? The Akatsuki agent shouted in dismay. I am using lightning chakra to negate your earth jutsu, Gaara stated plainly. It is a fairly common tactic. No, I won't allow it. You cannot censor me. Though the area around the point of contact remained dark, the rest of Deodara's form began to pulse brighter and faster. Nitsuki, if you would complete the circuit. Gaara asked his bodyguard as she finally reached them. The black orb gasped, and tried to turn to look. Of course, Lord Kazekige, she acknowledged with a nod. Raiten, power drain jutsu. What? No, stop. The inhuman construct demanded helplessly, as the kunoichi began to pull Gaara's electricity through Deodara's body, negating his attempt to localize the sand use's power. His flashes began to dim and slow, and his maw began to pant weakly. He slowly dropped to the ground, the suicide jutsu neutralized. Damn critics, he moaned as his body started to break apart. No appreciation for true talent. The final stores of his chakra spent, the remnants of Deodara's body crumbled into clumps of dry, inert clay. Gaara and Nitsuki ended their respective jutsus, and the hidden sand leader looked over at his allies. The foot soldiers were all dead or disabled, but the leaf and sand ninjas were virtually unharmed. Gaara sighed slightly, his anger over Kankuro abated and relieved that they had suffered no more losses. My original orders stand, the Kazekige told them. Matsuri and Ino stay with Choji. Nitsuki, Temari, and Shikamaru, you are with me. Unnecessarily, Hinata kept her eyes on Zetsu as she pulled the vegetables out of her right bicep and B. The wounds were fairly deep and moderately painful, but not life-threatening. But that could still slow her down. Still, she didn't have time to activate a healing technique. Despite her earlier assertion, Hinata realized she was essentially outnumbered by the ring bearer whose personalities could act somewhat independently. Wanna see what I can do with broccoli? The white Zetsu half taunted, half boasted while the black Zetsu again controlled their hands to create another attack. Hinata did not answer, but rushed forward again, this time placing a bit more of her attention on buffet line that separated this room from the kitchen. Even better, carrots, the pale half noted, launching a new set of vegetable spears at her, they're good for your eyes. Rotation, Hinata paused briefly to deflect the pointed roots. She knew he was trying to distract her, but kept her composure. She started moving again, but the dark side of the Akatsuki member had finished his advanced jutsu. Doton, top soil jutsu, he announced. Spreading out from his feet, a 2-inch thick layer of fertile dirt covered the floor of the dining hall, sprouting a carpet of fresh grass. This should uneven the odds, the black side told her smugly. She signed her own technique in response. Fuyuten, tornado howling, she said, and a fierce wind leapt up, pushing most of the dirt out the door and piling the rest in the corners. Zetsu just shook his head. Even if you hide it from my eyes, I can still sense the earth, he informed her, and that makes your trick empty. Release. However, as the genjutsu faded, leaving him again in the artificial field, Hinata was still moving her hands to shape her chakra. A distraction. The white side frowned, but the black side's eyebrow elevated in anxious surprise. No, that's... He started to protest, too late. Doton. Sedimentary jutsu, she completed the technique as he tried to pelt her with produce again. Tapping on her whipping willows taijutsu, Hinata slid around the attacks without moving her feet or releasing her power. Her earth chakra traveled through the soil, compacting it into another layer of rock atop the original granite floor. The grass died as its roots were crushed into paste and became part of the new stones. She blocked the last piece of asparagus with ginmaki. She glared at him superiorly, no longer able to prevent a part of her rage towards Naruto's kidnapper from showing on her face. She was moving again, and this time Black Zetsu shared a touch of his other half's worry. Time for that, he told his other self. Really? White Zetsu was overjoyed by the news. Are you sure? No, but just it. Zetsu signed quickly, and when Hinata reached her, he caught her wrist as she swung, stating, Mitosis Jutsu. The two halves of the Akatsuki warrior split apart, and whatever internal structure he had was covered by a green ooze that rapidly generated the missing half of each part. Hinata slashed at White Zetsu's left hand with the left blade of ginmaki, forcing him to release her. In return, he kicked her stomach, knocking her away. She recovered as she tumbled, and was able to barely avoid the vines that Black Zetsu fired at her. She landed on the wall feet first, and pushed off, slicing through the plants as she rocketed towards Black Zetsu. She cut and stabbed at him intensely with the twin projections, and the plant warrior could not keep up, taking a number of cuts and losing every tendril he sprouted. Are you going to help me? The serious side demanded. I thought you wanted me to get the dirt back. The easygoing version protested, pausing in his hand signs. Before either of them could move, Hinata turned at the waist, pointing her hands at the white Zetsu. Spark darts, she incanted sternly, without signing. And then she added for good measure, stone claws. The hands out of the floor held white Zetsu in place while the 7 barbs of lightning struck him. She turned back to Black Zetsu, and looked up at him, her face livid. Naruto, where is he? She insisted angrily, pulling back her hands and dismissing Ginmaki's lightning blades. Dead soon enough, just like you, he snarled, raising his right hand, his fingers elongating into sharpened stems, covered in thorns. He stabbed at Hinata, but she twirled away from him, and stepped back forward towards his open side. Gentle step twin lion fists, she proclaimed, slamming her chakra-wrapped palms into his chest. He started to fly back, but Hinata closed her fingers, and the energy lions closed their jaws, digging into his flesh and crushing his ribs. Then she pushed out almost gently, and he shot towards the wall with great speed and force. There was a sickening crunch when he hit, and blood soaked through the front of his robe as he slid into a heap. The white part of Zetsu gasped angrily as he finished freeing himself, but as she turned to face him her silver eyes were still glowing with an even greater rage, and the plant ninja somehow managed to look paler. Naruto? She asked again, and he stepped back. I delivered him to Lab 3 on the 5th floor, White Zetsu answered nervously, as far as I know, that's where the extraction was going to take place. If you hurry, you might still be able to save him. She turned to depart, running towards the door with an expression of relief. Before she could exit, vines covered the doorway. If you can make it, the white Zetsu's voice sounded more sinister. She paused, not bothering to turn as she watched him flash step over to his dead counterpart. He scooped up the black Zetsu, placing him inside his flytrap more. The leaves closed and Zetsu shuddered. Hinata rotated back to face him, reigniting her brace's chakra knives. The plant blossomed again, and once more Zetsu was in his whole, dichotomous form. She killed me, the black half growled. Don't worry, I'll return the favor, the white side said earnestly. Hinata, her anger spent and her goal nearby, just looked sadly at him. We don't need to do this, she said, almost pleading, please, just let me go. No, Black Zetsu said, even if I didn't owe you, I couldn't let you spoil our plans. He began to sign as the white personality took control of the vines and directed them at Hinata. She chopped through them with Ginmaki as she moved forward, and then negated the extensions again as a new seal spread out from her feet. Zetsu tried to complete his jutsu, but he was too slow. 8 trigrams, 2 palms, she announced, striking him twice in the neck. 4 palms, she continued, tapping 4 times around his heart from behind. 8 palm, 16 palms, 32 palms, she centered her blows on his spine and organs, shutting down the most important sections of his chakra network. 64 palms, 96 palms, still unable to achieve the full next exponent called for in Neji's jutsu, Hinata had designed a variant which split the difference. Zetsu died quietly, collapsing from the damage to his heart and lungs. In his last thoughts, he tried to send out his chakra to keep his body running, but the damage to his chakra network prevented any self-healing. As his life faded, so did the vines he created and controlled. Hinata exhaled, and activated a healing technique. She resolved herself again before dashing into the hallway. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.